Often, the most defining and shaping moments of our life come with the transitional bits. How we handle the changes, the big changes that life throws at us. How we pick the baton up, or how we pass the baton on. So think about, if you can remember that far back, how it was when you started school. It's kind of forming and shaping, isn't it? What kind of person are you going to be? You get to start again when you go to comp, pretty much. Meet new people. And how you react in that environment is very shaping. Think about when you started a new job or starting a new job. Think about when you entered into retirement. It's shaping and forming, isn't it? How we cope in that transitional moment, how we deal with the change. Think about kids perhaps coming, or as it is a little bit for us at the moment, kids leaving. These transitional moments of life really define us, don't they? They really shape us. We find out in some senses who we really are, or we become who we really are in those moments. I'm often drawn to the story of Star Wars, and it's not an insignificant moment in the Star Wars plot. When Yoda, do you remember when Yoda just disappears into thin air? And Luke grabs the lightsaber and puts the cloak on. That is not an incidental bit of cinema. That is expressing the weight and the responsibility and the gravity of the transitional moment, dealing with change. The moments of transition are defining for us. My granddad was, and I'm actually looking around, I don't know if anybody here knew my granddad. There's different words I've got written down here to describe him. Stern, austere. He was a stern, austere, conservative, in lots of different ways, character. And I knew him pretty well most of my life. Like, it's not that I had a bad relationship with him. I kind of knew him pretty well most of my life. But the last year, certainly the last couple of months when he wasn't well, and he was maybe subconsciously or consciously, I don't know, but I think probably subconsciously, kind of handing things over, passing on the baton, handing over, it was the business in my case, me and my dad, and handing over life skills, and maybe even some of the softer parts of his personality and his heart. He was sort of handing them over, and I saw a different side to him, or maybe I saw the real him. And it was shaping. He was a sharp, focused businessman and an engineer. And to be really blunt and honest, the two guys he's handing the business over to was me and my dad, and we weren't either of those things. We were going to work hard, we were nice people, but we weren't like that. And one of the goals that the three of us shared, sort of our dream, the money basket at the end of the day was to create a second production line. And my granddad was going to be the brains behind that whole thing. And he'd worked at it for 8 years on this production line. Every spare bit of cash that we had, every little bit of time that he was able to put into it, he worked away at this. And this was to be his retirement, all our retirements. It was what we were all aiming for. And I can remember him coming into our little canteen thing. And he really wasn't well, and he handed over to us the drawings for this production line. And the gravity of the moment hit, like sometimes maybe some of this stuff, when it can pass over you, the gravity of that moment hit me straight away. And the drawings, and I remember me and my dad, for years after we looked at these drawings, and some of the drawings, most of the drawings were kind of complete and formatted, like precise engineer's drawings. But that wasn't all of the drawings. Some of the drawings were handwritten and rushed. And those parts of the drawings were what he wrote in transition. What he wrote when he knew that he was going to be passing the baton on. And they weren't, what was really interesting and what we slowly got as we picked up the baton, was they weren't just what to do instructions. They were more like messages. They were a bit more like, this is how you should be, this is how you should feel, rather than this is just how to make this machine work. And we'd pick up these papers every Friday afternoon when we'd finish production for the week and try and make this machine again, and actually often just end up reminiscing or trying to figure out how to be in light of the baton that we'd picked up. So it was our time with the baton, and we were figuring out how to deal with the weight of all that and what it meant. The story that we're looking at, the text today, is about that kind of thing. Elijah is told by God that his season will come to a climax, it will come to an end, and somebody else will pick up the baton. Somebody else will be God's voice to the people. Elisha will pick up from Elijah, and he'll have his season running with the baton. And he will be, and I think this is one of the things we'll see in the text, hopefully we'll see this, he'll be really shaped by the transition, by coping with the change. And Elijah comes up, you can see it in the text. So this is picking up sort of verse 19. We'll come back to the first couple of verses. There's this big moment, quite an odd moment perhaps from our perspective, where he puts his cloak on him, or I think it says he throws his cloak over him. He's passing on the prophetic mantle. Elijah was God's voice to the people, and symbolically and physically, he's passing it over to Elisha. Now, just a bit of a sidebar. They didn't have coats like we have coats today. We've got, so I don't know what your coat and shoe cupboard is like if you've got a coat and shoe cupboard in your house. I get increasingly angry about the ridiculous amount of shoes and coats. Today we have about 5 coats for every season, don't we? We've got loads and loads of coats. I'm pretty firm that you should maybe have 1 coat, maybe 2, but we've got loads of different kind of coats. And if a coat gets a bit damaged, we move on and we throw it away or whatever else. Their detergent wasn't the same as our detergent either. We've got that washing machine that's in the corner of your kitchen is a legendary force. It's an incredible thing. And the detergent, the fact that we can clean everything up. Why am I rambling in this way? Because in these times, you didn't have loads of coats. That was Elijah's coat. That would have been stained with the last 5 or 10 or 15 years of his life. Probably it had blood on it. As we've been thinking about Elijah's life, it would have been filthy, given that he lived in the wilderness. And as Elisha puts on this coat, he's not only picking up the mantle, he's also picking up all of Elijah's travels as he does it. And I think one of the things that we see is Elisha will be long-shaped by the moment, this incredible moment that Elijah comes and puts the cloak on him. And he receives the baton. Life is defined a lot for us by how we pick up the baton, how we face the season that we're in, or the chance that is before us. Because it's something that we're handed, and it's something that will pass. So a couple of landing points in the sermon today. The first one will be, our lives have got a calling. This passage fundamentally is the calling of Elisha. And I think this idea of calling, at least to me, but I would sort of pass that on to you, I think it really speaks to us today. It's got something to say to us right where we are. Elisha is called to be the next prophet, to speak to God for the people. And if you remember to the last couple of weeks, part of what he'll be called to do is to confront evil Jezebel and Ahab. And we can think of that calling, if you like, vocationally. There's a sense in which Elisha is sort of ready in his life for this moment. It's his time. Do you know that sense of mission and vocation? This is right for him. He fits the bill. He's the right person to pick up the baton and run with it. And we kind of understand that idea of calling, I think. It's a very human thing. Christians and non-Christians will relate to the idea of vocation. It's interesting, I think, that we believe kind of innately that there is something out there for us. There's something that we're called to. There's something that makes us burn. But what's also going on, and what's behind the idea of calling, I think, and we see it in this story, is the literal voice of God. There's this idea of vocation that's in the story. This is his moment, this is his time, but behind that idea, God is actually speaking that into being. God is actually speaking him by name. You see that in the previous verses, verse 15 through. God's got him in mind. So verse 15 through to 18, you can see in there. It looks, as we think back through the story, that God's people are on their knees. There's nothing happening. There's no story to develop. But as you can see in this text, God is actually at work. His plans are at work, even though God's people are on their knees. He will make a way for those people, and ultimately a king who could save them. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 to 10 says, "For it's by grace you've been saved through faith. This isn't from yourselves, it's the gift of God. It's not by works, so no one can boast, for we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." Behind this vocation, this calling of Elisha, are the very detailed, thought through, determined, unmovable, unshakable plans of God. One of my real shortcomings, especially in family, hopefully increasingly less so in church as I look around and I see the elders looking in, is organization. I tend to drop the ball organizationally. Also, if you played football on a Thursday night, occasionally, very occasionally, there's mishaps with football pitches and all kinds of things, and that's always me. Not so my wife. God saw in his providence to provide me with a wife who was, there's different words for it, but let's use organized. Jude's got a 1-year plan. She's got a 5-year plan. Everything on the horizon is lovingly considered, and I don't have any of that. The last trip that we had to Cornwall, which I love. Cornwall is my favorite place, probably in the whole world. And we had this moment when, at least to my mind, we arrived on the beach, and I remember looking round, and I said to my lovely, wonderful wife, who I'm so thankful is teaching kids next door, "Isn't it incredible that we've just landed here with all this? I love the beach, and we're right on the beach. I love St. Ives, and we can walk to St. Ives. We can see the sunset over St. Ives. It's even got waves, and we love the sea." And I'm just raving on about everything that I love, like it's all just happened. And I literally used the words, "I can't believe we've landed here." And she looked at me with those beautiful eyes, like I had moments left to live. And she said, "We haven't landed here. I looked at you, I looked at our 3 kids, and this was all laid out and planned." And I was humbled, at least for the rest of the holiday, in that moment. We hadn't just landed there. We haven't just landed here. What is it that you're really brilliant at? What is it that you're the only person who sees? Do you know that thing where you're like, "I think I'm the only person who really aches about this, who really gets this"? What's at the root of your passions? What's the thing that you see on the news that you're desperate was different? Or what's the thing that you see in your community that you wish you could do something about? What would your life's mission be if you could take a big step back, have a sabbatical for a few months and look at it? What would you write if you had to write one sentence of my life's mission? What would that be? I would say to you that you haven't just landed there or here. We serve a God, as we see in this text, who has laid things out for us. We are God's handiwork. What a thought. That the God of all creation bothers to make us so intricately. We are created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. There is a calling on our lives, and it is not an idle calling. It's not an idle bit of cinema. The place that we find ourselves in, the baton that we might be picking up, that might feel really heavy, too heavy for us, is not an idle thing. There is a calling on our lives. Second thing, and you can see it as the story bears out through 19 to 21. If you can remember, as Andy read it, it's a high calling. That's the second thing that I think we see in the text. The calling that hopefully is preached, spoken to you from here, that you sing about when we worship together, that you remind each other of. It's not an insignificant calling. It is a high calling. So the story goes on, verses 19 through 21. Elijah went from there, found Elisha, son of Shaphat. He was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen. Try and picture it as best you can. And he himself was driving the 12th pair. Elijah went up to him, threw his cloak around him. Elisha then left his oxen and ran after Elijah. There's a pause here. Let me kiss my father and mother goodbye, he said, and then I'll come with you. And I've wrestled for a few days to try and imagine Elijah's tone here. I think it's disappointment. Go back, Elijah replied. What have I done to you? I'm going to give him a Yorkshire accent just for emphasis. So Elisha left him and went back. He took his yoke of oxen and slaughtered them. He burned the plowing equipment to cook the meat, and then he gave it to the people. So let me just run through the scene with you best I can, just so it's fixed in your mind. It looks to me like Elisha is busy. He's on the farm. He's mid-shift. I've read in various commentaries he's at the back. This is his farm, all his yoke of oxen. He's probably wealthy, and he's busy, and he's sort of immersed in this moment, and then God's man comes to speak to him. Often life is like that, isn't it, when we're in the middle of a busy day. And then Elijah comes and does this slightly weird thing. He throws his cloak on top of him, and Elisha knows, as I knew when I picked up my granddad's drawings, kind of knew the significance of the moment. He knew what was going on, I think. Probably clocked that it was Elijah. Knew what was happening. And for a second, for a millisecond, I think, you can see him stall or pause. He says, give us a minute. Let me just say goodbye. Let me say goodbye to my folks. Now, I need to tell you this, and I've preached this, perhaps not got it quite right, certainly as a youth. Don't judge me too much. But I know Elisha has copped for a lot of flack over the years, especially in light of the fact that Jesus says in his ministry, nobody who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of heaven. I think on that instance, if you look back through your Bible, I think it's in Luke 9, Jesus is speaking to a guy who is just out to try and make excuses. He likes what Jesus is doing, but he's just out to avoid actually getting caught up with it. I don't think that's what's going on in this story. Elisha does pause. Elijah's a bit ticked off. But I think this scene, as he runs back to his parents, is more a scene of the ache of parting. It more demonstrates, yes, I'm going to go. That's where Elisha's at. I'm going to go, and it's really going to hurt. And he runs and he kisses his parents goodbye. But then, to demonstrate, I think to Elijah, who, as I've said, is like, is this really going to be God's guy? Have you got this right? He's sort of, what have I done to you? You know, what am I asking of you? Am I asking too much? I think maybe to prove to him, prove to himself, or just to make it, this is also what's happening, just to make it so there's no other way for him. Notice how dramatic the text is here. All of the farm, all of the yoke of oxen, everything that he's got really to make any money and to provide for himself goes. He takes the oxen and he burns them on top of the wood from the plows. He burns up the production line, if you like. There is no way back. But don't miss, it's really economical, is this text. It's really beautiful. I think a lot of this would have been repeated as, told in a story. It's so beautiful, is this text. It truncates a much bigger story, I think. On the one hand, you see the cost of the calling, but on the other hand, this is a really incredible, beautiful moment. Like if you saw it in a film, he runs off and he kisses his parents goodbye. He's aching, but he's going to go, but he's aching. And then there is this all-in, I'm going to burn all of that up. I'm going to walk away from all of that. And then, incredibly, and you can hardly see it in the text, but if you dwell over it long enough, you realize that what's happening is he goes and feeds everybody. What is that? This is a poor little community having the biggest party. They would have never seen that amount of food in their lives. It's also, at the same time, the calling is a huge cost. It's an incredible thing. It is a beautiful thing. When something is worthwhile in this moment, when you give up everything for that, it looks beautiful. I'm a late arrival to the Adam Buxton podcast. I'm not going to ask. I know people, when you speak to people about podcasts, some people are all in, some people are sick to death of them. Podcasts, what the heck's a podcast? Adam Buxton podcast, it was in vogue, I think, a few years ago, and like everything else, I get there about 3 years too late. And I'm just getting into the Adam Buxton podcast. His latest one, so you can listen back, and I'd recommend listening back, is with a woman called Natalie Roberts. She's CEO of Médecins Sans Frontières, which is Doctors Without Borders. It's an awesome podcast. And as you sort of listen into this podcast, one of the things that you realize, she's an insanely capable person. She's studied forever to become a doctor, which you've got to do. And then she's taken all that, all of the lifestyle that she could have, all of the security that she could have, and she's gone to live with people who are vulnerable every single day. And you look on at the storyline, and you see that somebody who gives up everything for something that's worthwhile. This was kind of my reaction. I think I listened to it on a Saturday, and I was having a, woe is me, oh, the world's in a mess. That kind of a morning. And I listened to this. Somebody who was going to give up everything for something that was really worthwhile, and I saw the chinks of light. Again, do you know how that works? When you see somebody who is willing to sacrifice everything for something that's worthwhile, it's beautiful. It brings hope. You'll have seen similar stories. And this is like kind of an incredible story. She's an incredible woman. But the reality is, even when this happens on a much smaller scale, if you see somebody, partner's not well, long-term health conditions, and somebody quietly gives up all of their life to look after that person. Somebody's a nurse, probably doesn't get paid enough, and yet just does extra. Somebody's a teacher with a really tough class, and yet actually they just pour themselves into it. It's incredible, and it's beautiful. And it makes us think there are hundreds more possibilities. There's hope when we think that that's gone. There's something universally beautiful about somebody, anybody, who commits everything to something that's worthwhile. Christianity is very much like that. That's why we're here. The giving up of everything for something worthwhile that becomes beautiful. So beautiful, I would argue, that the world will never get away from it. It will always be pulled back in. And do you know what the worthwhile thing was? Us. The human race. That horrible mess. Us personally. And Jesus, God in Jesus, gives up everything. And we read, and I think we see, that Jesus was completely empty on that cross. He was emptied of everything. And we never get away from it. It keeps pulling us back. In the story, Elisha leaves the farm, family business. to follow God. Very simple point, but like one of these simple points from the story that's also, oh man. With Elisha, he was going to have to drop stuff. He was going to literally have to park some stuff, bring an end to some stuff before he could pick up what God had for him. And what God would have for him in the end would be incredible, but he was going to have to park something to do that. There's a truism, I think, about that in all of our life. Quite often, there's things that we see in front of us that we just will never ever get to if we can't put an end to some other things. It's almost always the case. And I think this story sort of shouts out of the text to us. Sometimes it's possible that there is something in front of us that's incredible, that's beautiful, like this story, but it might mean that we've got to drop something to get there. Last thing, and I think this story's, don't know how well I've preached it, but I think it's really amazing so far. You might think that the end is a bit of an anticlimax. I hope not. It is a bit anticlimactic. There's a calling, it's high, but notice the very end of the text. It's a bit anticlimactic. You're thinking, after all, all of the last couple of weeks, there's been fireballs, there's been wars, there's been battles, there's been incredible things. Like Elijah's been crazy brave. And then we get to this point in the story, and Elisha's probably thinking, right, what's next for me? What am I going to do? What's the adventure? Well, Elisha, look what you've won. If you dig around at the text, he becomes his attendant servant. And if you dig around at the text, what you realize is he does that for about 10 years, if you sort of chart all the length of the time of the kings and everything else. That's what comes at the end of it. Just this, what at least sounds like a fairly mundane existence, following Elijah about, helping him think through things, walking from A to B, fetching and carrying, learning from him all the time, but it's an everyday existence. So calling is purposeful, it's dynamic, it's dramatic, it's high, it's worth everything. But that all sometimes gets borne out in the ordinary, everyday. But we kind of know that, I think. Calling isn't just worked out in the big moments, is it? When you see somebody fated for Olympic glory, somebody you're like, they're on the path to Olympic glory, actually, most of their days are just filled with lonely bouts of exercise. And that is purposeful and beautiful too. It's going to be a long time before Elisha sees the fireballs, before he sees something that, humanly speaking, might make him think that all this has been worthwhile. Joe's going to preach it to us next week, but Elijah's going to miraculously be taken up into heaven, as God said it would. It's going to be a long time for Elisha, but it will happen. And for a season, Elisha will pick up the baton. He'll wear the coat. He'll live in light of what Elijah did. He'll live out those lessons of transition until he passes the baton on. We are all picking up the baton. Something. We are all living in a certain season of life, different seasons for all of us. There's different things that make us burn, different fires that burn inside of us, different things that get us out of bed, different tasks that are sat in front of us like they've been put there for us to do. None of it just landed there. You didn't just happen to think like that. There is a calling and a vocation behind it. And, like Elisha, we have a time to wait for it to come. We have a time to run with it. And we also have a time to pass it on. Just to finish. And I'm right on 6 o'clock. So I'm going to get thumbs up from the 25-minute preach. Best film ever. Me and Paul say that nearly every week now. It's just becoming a bit of a joke. Best film ever, which I watched just the other week, Dead Poets Society. I don't know if you've seen Dead Poets Society. Incredible film. Robin Williams doing Robin Williams stuff. And the start of the film, there's a scene in which he inspires a bunch of kids who are kind of indifferent to learning English literature by showing them some photographs of some former students. And he shows them the pictures of the former students, and he says to them, well, they're all worm food now. Something to that effect. And then he quotes Horace, I think that's how you say his name, Carpe diem. Because one day you will be worm food, young men, you should embrace now like never before. That should inspire you above all things. And I think that's what the film's about. I think it's seize the day, embrace the moment, because we don't know about tomorrow. And as I watched the film, I love Robin Williams. He gets everything that he does. Even when he's the genie in Aladdin, I'm emotionally involved. But in this moment, I was like, yes, can there be a better way to inspire us to seize the day than that? How about this? What if we saw what Elisha saw? What if we saw what the disciples saw, which some of us by the eyes of faith have seen? That our Master doesn't die. And you don't live because death's coming for you. You live because death is conquered. The baton that you carry and that baton handover is not the end of your shift. It's just another point in the relay. Today matters not just because it's a moment to maximize in and of itself, but because it's part of an eternal plan that God has laid down before. What if that? Do you think you just landed here? Do you think there might be a call behind the thing that you ache for? Could you hear it?